All right, Proverbs 19. Let's call this week's set of lessons sketches because I am running behind, trying to get caught up from delays that happened in previous weeks. And so now I am kind of pressed in my preparation and I need to give you roughly a sketch of what's going on this week, hoping that I don't still end up rambling in the full 5-minute lessons. But I hope to, in whatever amount of time it takes, still give you some value, maybe in a more abbreviated summary in this chapter that we will subtitle Free, because much like our previous chapters, there are some themes that are going to recur in these proverbs that can sometimes seem like they're simply coming at you fast without a lot of consistency. But even with the apparent chaos, there is some consistency in the fact that 6 times we are going to again seem to see that concept of wisdom directly come up in the Proverbs, understanding that they are all wise sayings. 7 times we're going to see those words of wisdom directed at what seems to be money or resources. 5 times, literally, it's going to seem like it's addressing God or the Lord, as we have seen in previous chapters. 6 times, it's going to seem to be less a direct discussion of wisdom as much as it's going to be wise counsel, with another 3 Proverbs seeming to focus on the wisdom with which we use words. And one of those sub-themes that seemed to catch my attention, not so much because of its frequency, but for whatever reason, because of a couple of connections I think I saw to Jesus's teachings, basically occurs in verse 1 where it says, "Better is a poor person who walks in his integrity than one who is crooked in speech and is a fool." Later in verse 17, it is going to say, "Whoever is generous to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will repay him for his deed." Skipping to verse 22, where it's going to say, "What is desired in a man is steadfast love, and a poor man is better than a liar." And one of the first things that came to mind is that's a whole lot of encouragement for the poor if you're not actually going through poverty. But then what I seem to be able to realize, as I said in Jesus's teaching, is the way in which he seems to turn the whole concept of blessing on its head in the Beatitudes, where he is going to start out in a lot of ways. Blessed are the poor in spirit, in I think the Gospel of Matthew, and blessed are the poor, he's simply going to say in the Gospel of Luke, reminding me that sometimes when a word seems originally maybe a little bit suspect to me, sometimes I need to do more introspection than suspicion of what was written. And so in looking at it a little bit more, I began to realize that one of the things I began to notice in my years of getting the opportunity to have conversations with people who lived on the streets is there are times when there are resources available to them. However, the freedom that they can find on the streets sometimes makes living on the streets actually a better choice for some, not necessarily for everyone. And then it began to hit me that to the degree a poor person is not enslaved to a certain behavior type, then they really may be better off, as Solomon is saying here, or the proverb writer is saying here, than someone who is enslaved to something that seemed like it was clever on the front end, but ended up becoming an addiction. Understanding that some of the typical addictions we associate with homelessness are obvious problems because they are socially stigmatized. However, to the degree we are enslaved to lying, we actually may be in worse shape because we are in a culture that more and more accepts lying, even though it can be just as addictive as some substance. Once we realize the emotional high of, as we say from time to time, what it can feel like to get away in a situation where we know we were possibly caught, or as they sometimes say, dead to rights. And then likewise, sometimes the lying itself can become a source of an emotional high because the thrill of the spin can sometimes seem clever. And if we're not careful over time, it can actually become fun. Understanding we have already passed up some proverbs that discuss the way in which doing wrong becomes fun to the foolish. And so beyond actual homelessness, Solomon may be reminding us that to the degree a poor man retains his integrity, he may have a degree of freedom that may make the freedom that person has found in their poverty of greater value than someone who has become enslaved to lying or simply becoming flat out shady.